Hey, everybody. While we wait for people to connect, we can all take a breather and anything people want to share on what's on their mind. I know there is a lot on people's mind currently. Hey, Madhu, thanks for connecting. Tyler, can you make Madhu the co-host so he can share the screen? I think I'll just share my own reflection and then we'll get started with the agenda for the class today. It's been a very stressful week for everybody. And I think just making sure that we all recognize each other and just take care of ourselves and our loved ones is very important. I know some of you have been watching this election from far away because there's a significant portion of international students in the class. The U.S. election is unfolding, as all of you know, and we still don't know what the outcome will be. So in the teams and projects, just keep that in mind that many of your coworkers and students might actually be stressed for many reasons beyond what is happening in the projects themselves. Let's be kind to each other and make sure we're supporting each other. This is a pretty tough time for a significant portion of people. And I think, we took a break. People voted, so that's something. What they voted for is unclear, but people voted, so at least we have that going for us. I think we have a invited guest today that I'm very excited about. So I think I'm going to dive right in the agenda today. And after Madhu's talk and open discussion, we will transition and just briefly, Tyler will do the logistics of the final presentations for the class as well. So just Madhu, for you, first of all, welcome to the class. This is Frugal Science. It's essentially a group of individuals from around the world. The distinction between mentors, students, and teachers is very vague here. Primarily, there are individuals, I think, from 20, 25 countries connected. And I've been running this class in the context of action-driven agenda items, but solutions to global problems. I would say 70% of the projects are health focused, but the rest are environmental and ecological context as well, and education. And several projects merge between the two as well. And I think what we'll do today is we'll do a special session on TB primarily. And we're very pleased, I'm very delighted that amongst us we have Madhukar Pai. And I'm going to read from some of his clothes, if you don't mind, Madhu, to kind of embarrass you a little bit. Madhu is the research chair in translational epidemiology and global health, and also the associate director of McGill International TB Center. He was trained in Vellore, India, so he understands the deep context of the challenges, and especially challenges in healthcare on the ground. He got his PhD in epidemiology at UC Berkeley and a postdoc at UCSF. And there is a gazillion awards that Madhu has received for his work, including, of course, the Gates Foundation Grand Challenges, the context of the Union Scientific Prize, the Chanchalani Global Health Research Award, and too many to name, including the membership of the Royal Society of Canada and the Fellow of the Canadian Academy of Health Sciences. But all of that is good. But what is really special about Madhu is he is incredibly open and vocal about sharing his views on how global health research should be done, how equity and diversity is at the heart of it. And I think that's how I learned about Madhu, first of all, was primarily by Twitter. And again, I think we've had wonderful conversations thinking about what does it mean when creative people, designers, and folks who've been thinking about and fighting the sets of challenges that exist in global health for a long while all come together. So the first half of the talk will really be sharing the challenge amongst in the context of one disease, TB. But I think, Madhu, this is going to be very informal. So anybody will jump in anytime. We'll turn it truly into a discussion. And I think the end half of the conversation will also be about Madhu's thoughts on how we can utilize a crisis to make a broader impact, and what does it mean from what might have learned from COVID in the context of TB. So without further delay, I think, Madhu, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Manu. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hi, everyone. So nice to see all of you. In the midst of this otherwise pathetic year, one bright spot that I've discovered, as I'm sure Manu has, is that thanks to the online teaching, we can pretty much travel the world sitting in our pajamas. We can learn from people around the world, and we can really engage people around the world. This summer, I taught 2 courses on epidemiology for health journalists, one for journalists in India and one for journalists around Africa, in many countries in Africa. And that really woke me up to the power of, education that has no degrees, no universities, no walls, nothing. And I didn't ask my university for any blessings or permission. I just did the damn thing, right? If I had asked my university, I would have probably gotten into a lot of trouble. But I don't give a shit. I just did it because there was a crying need for journalists to be educated as they were writing about COVID. They were writing some bullshit stuff that they didn't even understand what they were writing. And I felt that I could do something. Along the same lines, I think frugal science and innovation truly needs to be global. And full marks for Manu to kind of, Stanford is otherwise a very expensive, unaffordable school. So his ability to take this globally and engage people from so many countries is exactly what appeals to me. And that's why I'm here, to show my solidarity with that cause. So yes, we'll start with TB because that's my passion, my obsession, and something that I've been working on for years since my medical school days in India. And one which I think is a beautiful textbook illustration of why innovation has not happened much, and where I think the need for innovation is just off the scale. So if you wanted to make a difference, TB is one area that's just absolutely crying for some original, clear, innovative thinking and some interdisciplinary work. So that's again another reason why I feel obligated to contribute my time to your course, because I feel like if some of you go on to do a little bit of work on TB, that would be totally worth the time investment that I'm making. So in terms of just as a context, since I assume that many of you don't necessarily have a medical background, TB is a very ancient disease, very ancient disease. They found TB DNA in Egyptian mummies dating back to God knows when. So in some ways, TB and humans have co-evolved, and we know TB can affect animals as well. Originally, we thought TB jumped from cows or domesticated cattle to humans. Now we think it's the other way around. It's humans who gave the TB to livestock. That's a fascinating story on the evolution of TB. But if you look at the bacteria, that's exactly how they look under the ordinary standard microscope, as well as light microscope, electron microscope, slender rods, mycobacteria as they call. TB has a cousin called Mycobacterium leprae, which is closely related. And there are other environmental mycobacteria as well. So if you just look at your own shower head at home, you will find a ton of environmental mycobacteria lurking there. Most of the time, they do nothing to us. But if you are seriously immunocompromised, then bad things can happen with environmental non-tuberculous mycobacteria. So TB has 2 forms. One is, for example, I have something called latent tuberculosis. How do I know? Well, I must have gotten infected way back when, during my medical school training in India, when somebody coughed on me in the hospital. I inhaled a bunch of these, millions of these bacteria, but my immunity somehow contained it. I did not develop sickness. I did not cough. My lungs X-rays are clean. But if you do a tuberculin test on me, or the immunological T cell tests on me, you will find that I'm positive on all of them. That means I have a small risk of developing TB in future if the latent infection can progress and develop TB. Or for example, if I suddenly now had HIV and my CD4 cell counts go down, that could tip me towards a TB. Or if I took immunosuppressive medications, that could cause TB in me. But active TB is when you have actual symptoms, you're coughing, you have low-grade fever, and you have symptoms like this: fever, weight loss, weakness, night sweats. In the past, TB used to be called names like consumption. Consumption meaning it kind of consumed you from inside. In the Victorian days, you would see these pale people who are slowly dying away, right? And wasting away. That's your classic TB. And if you've seen Moulin Rouge, you see Nicole Kidman presents the classic Victorian ideal of a lady with TB. And if it really gets advanced, it eats up your lungs, you can start spitting out blood, coughing out blood. But TB can affect any part of the body: lymph nodes, spine, TB of the abdomen, TB of the brain and the meninges. So TB can be quite extensive. In people with HIV, TB can present as a very disseminated form of disease where pretty much it's widespread in the body. Now, this is a picture of my grandmom, who I know extremely well, and I remember her very nicely, and her husband, my grandfather, whom none of us remember, not even my mom, because he died of TB in his 20s in India. That was a long time ago, right? We're now looking at 80 plus years ago. So in those days, there was nothing anybody could have done for him. He was just unlucky. Today, I would have easily cured him if I was managing him. In those days, the best people could do was to go, if they could afford it, to go to sanatoria like these. This is a classic image of a sanatorium. And hopefully with sunshine and a lot of fresh air and decent food, the body could just pretty much fight it off. And if you couldn't afford a sanatorium, you pretty much died at home, which is the only other option that was available. So this was TB until the first anti-TB antibiotics were. So Selman Waxman, working at Rutgers University in New Jersey, was the first one who found that streptomycin could work against tuberculosis, and that kind of start off the era of anti-TB medications.
So Madhu, on the sanatorium side, something you mentioned, do we now understand the biological underpinnings of why sunshine was important? Or, I mean, I've always been confused about this clean air. What does that really mean?
Yeah.
Is there actual clinical evidence that this was helpful?
Not really. The link between vitamin D and TB, if you see sunshine as a vitamin D issue, has been tested, but nobody in the TB world is convinced that vitamin D is a strong protective effect against TB. And so even if it's COVID, there are people throwing around vitamin D and COVID, right? All sorts of crazy ideas floating around. So vitamin D is this attractive silver bullet, but I don't think there's enough there to talk about it. And lots and lots and lots of rich and famous and amazing people have either died of TB or developed TB. Mandela, Keats, Bronte sisters, Kafka, Chekhov, Orwell, Chopin, D.H. Lawrence, Amitabh Bachchan. The list keeps going on and on and on, depending on how you look at it. And historically, the disease has really shaped, human history in a remarkable way. Too many amazing people have been taken away early on because of TB. So where are we today? So that's the past, right? So, I can accept my grandfather dying of TB, right? Just bad luck. But today, even this year, we lost almost 1.5 million people to a curable bacterial infection, right? It's one thing to lose someone to a disease that you can't treat, right? But COVID, we just don't even know how exactly to treat it. But to lose someone to a curable bacterial infection, to me, is not a medical problem. It's an issue of neglect, right? It's not a technical problem. It's not that we don't have the medicine. And honestly, the medicines for a standard drug sensitive TB cost $20. Okay. So it's not like an astronomically priced medicine like hepatitis C treatment. It's not one of those. The fact is, we're still losing too many people to TB even today. This is last year's numbers, 1.4 million. And I guarantee you the number has jumped this year because of COVID. And I'll show you why I think the numbers have gone up this year. Secondly, 10 million people fall ill every year due to TB, 10 million. And most of them, you will not be surprised, are in low and middle income countries, right? So it's not the US, it's not the Canada, it's mostly low and middle income countries. In fact, just a handful of countries account for a gigantic share of TB, and they're mostly in Asia and Africa, right? That's where the disease burden is highest. Now, if you look at TB and HIV, it's no surprise that they kind of feed off each other. Wherever there is HIV, you will find TB, and wherever there's TB, you will find HIV. So if you look at the sub-Saharan African continent, these two infections should not be kept separate. You got to treat them as a unit, right? So the rate of co-infection is astronomical. So if you go to South Africa, if you know someone with HIV, you absolutely must worry about TB and vice versa, because there's about 70% of people who have both, right? So you got to manage both. If you look at HIV today, the number one cause of death among people living with HIV today globally is TB. That's the infection which will kill them. HIV itself will not kill them if they are on antiretrovirals. It's the TB that will kill people with HIV. And then we have 500,000 people every year with drug resistance. So in the past, and drug resistance, like everything, every other aspect of antimicrobial resistance, drug resistance is not new. Drug resistance is not a difficult phenomenon to understand. When Selman Waksman came up with streptomycin for TB, initially people responded beautifully. Within a matter of weeks, the bacteria became resistant to streptomycin. Why is that? Because a single antibiotic, when you have a large number of bacteria, it will beautifully kill off the most susceptible strains, and the tough ones with mutation that protects them will thrive in that environment, right? You will select out strains which are resistant. So we learned the hard way that TB can never ever be cured with a single antibiotic, not with 2, not with 3. We need to hit it with 4 different antibiotics before that the bacterial number can be brought to a low enough number. That we do with the 4-drug treatment for 2 months. Then after that, since the bacterial load is down, we can switch to 2 antibiotics for the remaining 4 months. That's how the 6 months standard treatment is done. But if you have drug resistance, then this standard 6-month treatment simply will not work, because drug resistance by definition is resistance to all of those first-line drugs, right? Rifampicin and isoniazid are the 2 most important antibiotics. The minute we lose them, we are into this dangerous zone called drug-resistant TB. Within drug-resistant TB, there is multi-drug resistant TB, and there's extensively drug-resistant TB, MDR TB, XDR TB. As you develop resistance to more and more drugs, it becomes XDR, MDR, and XDR. And then some countries like India have also reported something called totally drug-resistant TB, TDR. WHO doesn't like that term, but that pretty much means not even a single medicine that we know will work on that patient. That's pretty much going back to the sanatorium era, because you can't treat them anymore. You just have to wait and see if they will ever cure themselves, which they won't. The thing about drug-resistant TB is drug-sensitive TB, even with the best efforts we're putting in, about 5% of people will die. Compare that with the COVID case fatality that everybody is getting all agitated over, right? TB, we lose about 5% of people even today. Drug-resistant TB, we lose about 50% people. MDR TB. XDR TB, you're looking at losing about 80% of the people. And TDR TB is practically 100% because there's no way to save people, and you pretty much lost all antibiotics in your arsenal.
So,
Now,
Madhu,
how,
just
yeah.
a quick question on, and again, people should type questions in the chat. What is the prediction on the ratio that this will increase in terms of the resistance side? Are there any prediction models that talk about in 2 years from now, 5 years from now, what are we looking at? I mean, I saw the 10 million and a half million number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, the question is, are we doing a good job of TB control, right? If you are doing a good job of TB control, then obviously then the XDR, MDR number should go down. And if you're not doing a good job, that number will go up. So it all depends on the scenarios that you model. And yes, there are people who model those sorts of scenarios. The challenge with TB is, and I'll explain this a little bit more later, we've never had a good vaccine for TB, never in the history of TB. It's not a viral infection. It is a complicated mycobacterial infection. And a good vaccine has been elusive for a century now. So since the current vaccine sucks, the only way we've learned how to deal with TB is to do this test and treat, right? We wait for you to fall sick. Then we detect you TB in you early enough, and then we give you 6 months of antibiotics. And then that, we hope, will cut transmission in the community, right? Obviously, there is another good way to control TB, and that is just socioeconomic development, right? With better nutrition, with reduction in poverty, with reduction in overcrowding, many countries saw massive reductions in TB, which is why you don't see much TB in the US, you don't see much TB in Canada or Europe, because these are highly developed countries with good standards of living, good nutrition, so on and so forth. So TB and poverty are great friends, and they really thrive beautifully with one another. But in most settings, the detecting TB and putting them on treatment quickly is the only real strategy for reducing the TB burden. And that is what was packaged as a DOT strategy, right? To detect people with TB and then directly observe them taking medicines so that they'll finish the 6 months of course of treatment, antibiotics, and then become non-infectious to other people. So DOTS, for all its issues, it has saved lots of people, right? Because people did get free antibiotics through DOTS programs. Many millions of people have been treated. So if you look at that from that perspective, yes, we've done a decent job. But then if you look at the transmission reduction, the fact that even last year we had 10 million people with TB suggests that we simply are not bending the curve, right? The flattening of the curve we talk about in COVID has simply never happened for TB. We continue to see millions of people year after year after year have TB, and we are far away from reaching the targets that we have set. So unless something dramatic changes, we have a breakthrough in terms of a very good vaccine or a very short effective treatment, like a 1 month treatment, very inexpensive, easy to use point of care diagnostic for TB. Until such revolutionary things happen, we are simply not seeing this curve break. And one reason why such tools have not been coming forward is that TB is one of the most underfunded areas, despite its disease burden, right? If you look at the funding gap, we need about 13 billion every year. And right now we are only getting about 6.5 billion for just treatment of people and disease control programs. For R&D, TB needs about 2 million a year. It's getting barely 1 million a year. So whichever way you look at it, the investment in TB has been abysmal. And this is just not a new phenomenon. This has been the case in the entire known history of TB. And that brings me to this most vexing slide that I ever show in my talks. And now I'm going to go on a rant. You have to bear with me because this is where all my frustration starts coming out. If you walked into an average TB clinic in an average place in an average high burden country, this is what is happening in front of you. If you don't believe me, you walk into a TB clinic in your country. If you're living in one of the high burden countries, this is what you will find. Firstly, you will find that babies born are still getting poked with this vaccine called BCG. Okay, BCG was created by Calmette and Guérin, two guys, French guys, at the Pasteur Institute exactly 100 years ago, 1921. So next year will be the 100th anniversary of the BCG vaccine, right? And the vaccine sucks. So in India, the efficacy of this BCG vaccine, and India has the highest burden of TB in the world, the efficacy of this BCG that every Indian baby, including me, got is 0%. Okay? I'm sure Manu, you got this as well.
I have it on my arm.
Yeah, you have it on your arm, and the efficacy in India is 0%. Then you can ask me, okay, why the hell is India giving this? Well, maybe we thought one day it'll protect us from COVID. Who knew? No, we don't know if it protects us from COVID or not. It's being tested. But basically, BCG has some protection in the children in the most vulnerable period. And it has actually protected lots of Indians from leprosy, believe it or not. Beautiful link between widespread use of BCG and a reduction in leprosy. And BCG has this non-specific immune boosting property that may have helped somewhat. For all those reasons, we still continue to give it because we don't have anything better. Second, if you walk in and you say, what is a good screening test for TB? How do I know somebody should be tested further for TB? All I can offer you right now is a chest X-ray. And we know how many years ago chest X-ray came up, right? Röntgen came up with X-ray more than 100 years ago, right? What about once you say, okay, X-ray looks abnormal, let's get a sputum. How do we test the sputum? Well, that good old microscope right in front of you, right? A microscopy goes back directly to Robert Koch, 1882, okay? 1882 is when Robert Koch saw the TB rods under the microscope and identified MTB as a causative agent of TB. And that's pretty much our frontline test in most low and middle income countries today. How do we test for latent TB infection? Well, the most common test is tuberculin skin test, right? Where we put a little bit of tuberculin antigen under the skin, and then we see the lump that appears. Well, who came up with tuberculin? Well, Robert Koch, 1882. Okay, that's where tuberculin goes back to. We still give painful, toxic 2-year treatments for drug-resistant TB, including injections every single day. Injections like kanamycin, which are toxic and can cause deafness. We still use paper-based forms, right? That's why we only have TB reports annually done, updated once every year. So 2019 data we got last month. So we are 1 year behind TB data. Talk about COVID dashboards and ask yourself, how far away are we from any kind of real-time intelligence on TB? This is the miserable toolkit we have for TB in 2020. It pisses me off to no end. And if you ask me, why is this? I'll give you a very, very simple answer, cynical as it might be. It's because TB doesn't affect white, rich people in rich countries. End of story, right? You know what happens when rich, white, privileged people develop any disease like COVID. They will pour billions into R&D. They'll develop vaccine candidates within 6 months. They will spend as much as necessary to protect themselves. But if TB primarily affects Black and brown people in poor countries, nobody gives a damn, nobody invests. That's why no company touched TB for years. No company wants to touch TB. No pharmaceutical industry will come to the table and work on TB unless they're given massive amounts of money by somebody to work on it. So TB is not seen as a profitable market by any metric for anyone. So if we wanted to reimagine TB care, we can. This is my vision of what a lovely, beautiful, modern TB service might look like, where I think it'll be so cool to have some kind of a cough detection app, which can tell us, who should be further tested for TB, or some kind of a digital stethoscope, which can quickly say, okay, this is probably, TB. a simple, portable, handheld, affordable digital X-ray with an artificial intelligence-based image reading software, or a simple, quick triage test, like a dipstick test, which will tell us, okay, this person is the one who should be tested further. And then maybe we can do a point of care molecular test for TB and drug resistance, or a non-molecular antigen detection test like what's been developed for COVID right now. And then for drug resistance, we will be using gene sequencing. And sequencing can do a great job of detecting mutations. Sequencing is getting easier and cheaper. And then maybe we will have a very short regimen. The dream would be like a 1-month treatment for TB, not a 6-month treatment for TB. And then we'll send the patient home with a simple tool which they can use to make sure they're on treatment, maybe a cell phone reminder service, maybe a digital video DOT system, or maybe some way of calling them once in a while to check on them, a cashless payment if they're poor and then they need cash transfers. And then a new vaccine would be wonderful if we can come up with something better than the BCG, which is not a great vaccine. And then all of this will be paper-free. All of this will be going into a cloud, and we'll have a dashboard exactly as we have for COVID-19, where we know exactly where there is disease, how much disease, what are the hotspots. Everything is available and tracked from our phones or our iPads. That would be just amazing. TB care right now is far away from this dream that I have painted here. So this is
just Madhu, just going back to that dream, and I think it reminded me of when Madame Curie went out into the World War making portable X-rays for soldiers, and it was a very short period of time. After our conversation, I looked back at it, and this historic anecdote, when the World War started, she felt that it was important, and she's the one who figured out with several people on how to make X-ray portable in that time. I mean, the X-ray had just been invented, the Nobel Prize had just been given, and there are these famous photographs of her driving a radiology van with a portable X-ray into the war zone, literally, like X-ray being done on the edge. So the point that I wanted to make here was just, where do you think the governments fit in? Because the scale we are talking are so large, and I've seen piecemeal approaches.
Yeah.
Where would you, I mean, in an internal conversation, where would you rank their approaches of, do you feel there is a country that has taken this view systematically? Because I can clearly see if you do half of these, but don't do the other half, it doesn't cause the kind of dent.
Great point. I think among all the countries that I've worked in or I've seen, South Africa has shown the most interest in doing something progressive. But if you wait till I get towards the end of my talk, I have a hunch that the COVID pandemic might be an amazing opportunity to rethink how TB care is being delivered. I see great potential. TB by itself simply does not motivate politicians and policymakers in any country. In any country. Again, because even within a country, within India, within South Africa, the elite, the rich, the upper classes don't get TB much. It's the poorest segment, and they react exactly the way white people don't care about disease and black and brown people, right? The same kind of hierarchy and privilege applies even within low and middle income countries. Because the rich and the famous within countries don't get it, they just don't care about the disease. So they just let 100-year-old vaccines be given or 100-year-old tests being used. Nothing motivates them to actually invest in this disease, unfortunately. That's the reality. So here is an example of what I just said. This is a real picture of me, not that I had drug-resistant TB, but if I had it, look at the number of pills and injections I would have had to take over a 2-year period and then end up with a 1 in 2 chance of dying. Can you see that? It would have, if you piled up all the pills, that would have been like, a skyscraper 1,200 stories high. That is the amount of pill burden and injections that one would need to take for drug-resistant TB, which is why I'm trying hard to look very miserable in this picture. And then in this picture, I'm looking much happier because there are people like TB Alliance that has developed this short 6-month all oral drug regimen called Nix TB, approved by the US FDA last year. And look at the difference in the pills, right? That is the old treatment. That is the new treatment for drug-resistant TB. So innovation is happening, and some of these pictures are real, right? But my biggest rant is that they're just not reaching enough people. And I think this is a common recurrent theme in global health, which I'm sure you've learned from Manu in this course. Just because somebody develops a product, it is far from guaranteed that it is going to reach the person who needs it the most, right? This innovation gap, or the delivery gap, as we call it, is just astronomical in many settings. So here is the new drug, right? So this regimen contains a fantastic new antibiotic called bedaquiline, developed by Johnson & Johnson a few years ago. Really good drug, okay? But Johnson & Johnson has priced it at $400 US for a 6-month course. And then there's obviously other medicines, so on and so forth, right? And so this ends up being like $1,000 some for each patient. And most countries are just not able to afford it, right? I told you a standard drug sensitive treatment cost 6 months is $20. And if I have to now buy a treatment for 6 months for $1,000, most poor countries are simply not able to absorb that cost, right? So there's a big gap between the estimated number of people who need bedaquiline versus the number of people who actually receive bedaquiline, right? That is a massive chronic problem in many areas of global health, especially in the area of TB. So I wrote another piece, another rant, basically saying like, look, just because there are better treatments, that doesn't mean they're going to deliver themselves, right? And I think Manu and I discussed this as well when we had a one-on-one call. It's important that as much as you're passionate about innovation, that you also think very hard about delivery of that innovation. Otherwise, it's going to sit on a shelf somewhere. It will not reach that person who's just about to die because the systems are not in place to deliver it. And that, if you really want to think through delivery, there's a whole science of global health delivery or implementation science. So at some point, innovators or product developers must talk to people like me who are not innovators, not product developers, but our DNA is how do we get that box or kit or that test to those who need it the most. The marriage between the discovery people and the delivery people, I'm not sure is really happening much in the global health space, right? It's remarkable how people think, oh, we have an FDA approval for this product. For me, that FDA approval means shit, because for me, the battle starts with the FDA approval, right? I then know how much longer that journey has to go after the FDA approval. So it's almost like sometimes I think we are from Mars and Venus, right? We just don't understand, because for you guys, you were like slaving away in your lab, in your engineering, you're doing this, you're doing that, and you think, we got this thing on the market, right? High five, pop the champagne open. For me, I'm like, yeah, thanks. What next, right? Where are you going with this? How affordable is this? How are you going to get into that village in rural India or rural Tanzania? What is the pathway? What is the supply chain? What is the affordability? What is the policy, right? How do you get endorsement at WHO? What is the quality? I start asking 15 other questions, and all the tech guys, their eyes starts glazing over, right? Because for them, they've simply not thought through this, or they don't necessarily need to think through it. I'm not saying you guys need to think through everything, but you need to, early on in your discovery process, have some clarity on the delivery challenges if you care about global health. If you care about putting something for people in Sunnyvale, I'm not interested in that. I'm talking about global health, right? In global health, I can tell you, it is far from guaranteed that anything will ever reach people unless you really work hard to make it happen. Nothing happens in global health on its own, organically. You got to have people plan it and stick to it. And there's a whole advocacy strategy around it. For example, the number of stakeholders that need to come together to get this new TB regimen up and running is incredible, right? And then WHO needs to endorse and bless this regimen. Otherwise, countries will not touch it, which means you got to go run around, understand WHO policy making, guideline making, all of that, right? And then you need pathfinder countries. Some countries should say, hey, this looks interesting. We're ready to take it and we'll run with it. And that opens the door for products to reach people. And you need to go beyond donation programs. I have run out of patience for these small donation programs. Yeah, we'll gift you 1,000 doses of something or the other, right? I don't want that kind of charity, right? I want a real pathway for these products to reach people. And then regulatory bodies, oh my God, you can have products sitting with regulatory agencies for 3 years before they get approved, right? So you have to understand what the Indian FDA looks like, what the South African FDA looks like, who is to bless that full scope or whatever you've developed, right? Somebody needs to say, yeah, you can use it on patients, right? That's a regulatory process. And then donors, you got to understand the donor landscape. Why or how would Gates support this? How would Global Fund pay for this? How will Unitate pay for this? How would UNICEF pay for this? How would PEPFAR pay for this? You got to understand how donors work, because donor driven implementation is dominant. For example, if donor driven implementation was not there, you can imagine how many millions of Africans with HIV/AIDS will not be on antiretrovirals right now, right? So you got to understand the donor support system. And then you need advocacy. Advocacy is fundamental. If the advocacy around HIV/AIDS had not happened, then ARV coverage would still be in the miserable low numbers right now, right? Advocacy is spectacularly important. You need to understand, you need to engage the civil society. You need to engage people who've been affected by the disease, because they are powerful advocates. So if you folks haven't, you got to watch some incredible global health movies, which kind of tell you this whole story. It's a painless way of understanding what it takes to get stuff out into the hands of people who need it. So from an HIV/AIDS perspective, How to Survive a Plague is a beautiful documentary. Okay, How to Survive a Plague. It's there as a book. It's there as a documentary. Very powerful, right? It's like a beautiful example. Think about, I have a great product. What happens afterwards? Well, if you want to know how to get it to people, then understand how to survive a plague is a good one. Fire in the Blood is another wonderful movie by Dylan Mohan Gray. It's on Netflix. Fire in the Blood is all about how Indian generic companies finally broke the log jam of getting antiretrovirals accessible to people in Africa and worldwide, and the amount of engagement and advocacy and struggle that people had to do to reach that point. So, Fire in the Blood and How to Survive a Plague are both stories which tell you what a struggle it is to go from that FDA approved pill to actually reaching a certain level of scale or saturation that you need before you start seeing an impact, be it HIV, be it malaria, be it COVID, right? Now, let's say a COVID vaccine is successful in phase 3. Where is the guarantee that it's going to reach anyone in a low income country? Right now, there is zero guarantees, right? Got to work like a dog to even plan a strategy to get it to those who need it the most in low and middle income countries. So there is a whole science behind global health delivery, and understanding where and when you hand off as a product developer. I think it's very helpful, even in the early stages of your product development, to have someone who understands the downstream issues, to be able to sit with you and say, hey, if you develop a product and you think by pricing it, like, if your cost of goods is $100, you have zero chance of it getting scaled up anywhere, well, that's good for you to know, right? Where does the frugality come in, right? If you call it frugal science, you almost begin by thinking, that an expensive product is a dead in the water proposition, right? In global
And
health.
as a step one, that is really the heart of this conversation as well. Is that,
Exactly.
but only
Exactly.
one cost is only one of this multidimensional
Absolutely.
landscape.
Absolutely.
And I think,
Absolutely.
unfortunately, in product development, even the cost has not been a main design parameter. Yeah.
Nicely put. So I'm happy because this is exactly the course where I think you will understand why I'm saying this.
Mhm.
Because if you have frugal in the title, that means you care about this issue, right? I don't necessarily see that interest in many people in high income countries like ours, because here frugality is not what they're thinking, right? They'll say, let's develop the best and we'll figure it out later, right? But
Mhm.
with global health, you got to begin with the idea that this is a difficult place and you just can't jet set in with some ridiculous expensive solutions that will not see the light of the day. Okay, so that then here is another rant of mine where I'm saying one of the problems in all of global health, antiretroviral treatment, COVID vaccines, the TB medicine that I showed you, the gene expert molecular test, I don't care what, the dominant model is innovation will happen at Stanford, at Sunnyvale, in Silicon Valley, in Seattle, in London, and then that's when the product will emerge. Okay, and then what happens? Well, we're all waiting. We're all waiting in Africa, right? And then 20 years later, somebody will finally figure out a way to deliver it in sub-Saharan Africa or India or whatever. This is the dominant model of global health technologies. And I call this a trickle down model, right?
Mhm.
One day that Sunnyvale product will finally find its way, and then boom, it's actually being used in DRC or in the front lines of the battles in Kailicha in Cape Town, right? And how long does it take, right? If you have seen that diffusion curve graphic, which I should have put here, it takes about 20 fucking years for those products to reach people. And I'm like, what the hell? What the actual hell? It took 20 years for antiretrovirals to become easily accessible. And I can give you stories. When I was a resident in India in Vellore, I was asked to take a hepatitis B shot. I'm talking about the year 1994. Okay. I said, sure, sign me up because I'm scared of getting hepatitis. I don't want to get hepatitis. And I know I've been poked many, many times with needles. They said, yeah, you can take it, but it's a GlaxoSmithKline Beecham vaccine, right? And it's going to cost you like 3 months of your salary. I'm like, are you guys serious? Right? I said, I can't afford it. Then they said, no, but you can't work here as a resident then. You have to get vaccinated. I'm still unhappy with my hospital for not giving it to me free, right? You cannot not protect your healthcare workers. Regardless, I then paid 3 months of my salary to get that vaccine, 3 shots of the hepatitis B vaccine. Today, that same vaccine made by an Indian generic biotech company is 25 cents a dose.
Mhm.
What was 3 months of my salary is now 25 cents a dose. But how many years did it take? 20 bloody years, right? The dominant model is this. It takes a decade to 2 decades for any global health innovation that comes from the global north to finally reach some level of saturation in a country like India. So I'm like pissed off as hell about this. And I wrote a piece and I said, we got to really rethink this trickle down model. Why can't innovation happen in India, in South Africa, in Nigeria, in Bangladesh? What prevents this kind of innovation coming organically? Because they have the disease burden. They understand what the hell this is doing to them. They have smart people. Why are they not able to develop that kind of innovation? And it's vexing. I was on a Lancet Commission meeting with John Nkingasong, who was the director of Africa CDC. He said, Madhu, African continent uses every year multiples of millions of rapid tests for malaria. Okay, millions and millions of rapid tests for malaria. And he said, not one of them is manufactured on the African continent.
Mhm.
I'm like, how ridiculous is this? Not one factory in Africa can develop, manufacture a simple RDT. Come on. Come on. This is bullshit. I cannot accept this. I cannot buy this. You're telling me South Africa can't manufacture RDTs? You think Nigeria can't pull off an RDT? I mean, what is this? So this is just absolute idiotic thinking, one that stifles innovation at the country and makes them dependent on the global north for even a bloody malaria RDT. We got to change this, which is why I love that you were all from all over the world, because you really should not be reliant on Sunnyvale or Stanford or anyone. You should just innovate whatever your needs are. So I'm happy that there are some countries, at least low middle income countries, developing their own COVID vaccine. Otherwise, imagine you are now beholden to Moderna. They will fleece the hell out of you, the Pfizer's or I mean, they will skin you alive and they won't even share the vaccine with you, right? We've already seen rich countries have gobbled up all the doses of the vaccine. Where is the hope for LMICs in this space, right? So the lack of innovation and the need to rethink this model. So if you're excited about this particular area, read my piece. I've interviewed a lot of interesting people in writing this piece. And then I just want to finish off now. We're telling you how devastating COVID-19 is actually for TB right now as we speak. And my more recent piece on whether we can use all of the innovations around COVID-19 and the systems and rethink TB care. I'm sure you can use the same logic to rethink malaria care, rethink HIV care, whatever it is that you're passionate about in your country. So firstly, if you have not already internalized this, COVID is just wiping out decades of progress in global health. It is beyond scary, the amount of devastation that's happening right now. I read somewhere, it was actually a Gates report, Gale Goalkeeper's report. It said 25 years of progress wiped out in 25 weeks. Can you just understand the depth of that statement? 25 years of progress wiped out in 25 weeks. Okay, that's how devastating COVID-19 is. HIV mortality is expected to double. Malaria mortality is expected to double. TB, we're expecting even this year 400,000 additional deaths because of COVID-19. Millions of kids have not received their vaccines. Just basic vaccines have been missed. Unintended pregnancies, millions of moms and pregnant women have not received the care. Diabetes care has fallen through the roof, to the floor. Poverty, we are now in the deepest recession since World War II. And amount of money that countries have in their shattered economies to invest in any of these issues is going down, right? So we'll have to now do more and more work with less and less money for health is the overriding anxiety here. Really scary infographic that a student of mine and I worked together. And we confirmed this by doing a large study in multiple countries with many civil society groups on how devastating COVID-19. And this infographic kind of captures it all. Everywhere we've gone, people are simply not seeking care for TB because they're scared. They don't know whether it's COVID. They don't know whether it's TB. The symptoms are very similar, cough and fever. And even when they seek care, the hospitals are very busy with COVID. They're not able to take care of TB. There's diversion of TB lab people to do COVID work. There's diversion of TB staff to do contact tracing for COVID. Funding for COVID, TB has been diverted towards COVID. Everywhere, everybody is just obsessed with COVID. TB is just dropped. And all of that is shown up in this year's global TB report that came out last month. Look at the number of cases in TB that have just plummeted downwards. India, Philippines, Indonesia, South Africa. It's almost like a 25 to 50% drop in the TB cases we would have normally seen. If last year's numbers had held, we would have had to see a certain number of TB patients. Just not seen that. Why? Because of lockdowns, because of disruptions, because of anxiety, because of COVID-related stigma. Hospitals are closed. Hospitals are becoming a scary place for us to go. I mean, none of us want to go anywhere near a hospital right now. We don't even want to leave our homes, for Christ's sakes, right? So if this is how things are, you can imagine the devastation. Now, every case that has been missed now is like adding to the backlog, right? Every month, more and more missing people have gone into that pile. Now, India alone, for example, has missed something like 500,000 TB patients in the first 6 months of this year. India alone, right? That's India's huge reduction in 2020 compared to 2019. People who are already on DOTS treatment in India have stopped taking medicines. Why? Because they have not got a refill of their medicines, right? TB medicines are dispensed usually 1 month at a time. And that is simply not enough when you have a lockdown that's going on and on and on, or a second lockdown, a repeated lockdown, restrictions. It's just complete chaos. And if you think that this is just TB, it's not. Even standard measles vaccines, polio vaccines have just been stopped in many, many places, right? So it's an all-round destruction, and TB is just absolutely hammered TB services. And then we are also very worried because if you look at medicines, TB medicines, most of them are made out of India. Why? Because India is world's generic pharmacy, right? So if India continues to suffer in COVID, and Indian pharmaceutical companies don't keep up with the production, we are expecting TB medicines to be stocked out next year. Because for now, we may have enough medicines this year, but next year we might be stocked out. Products like the Cepheid Sunnyvale diagnostic for TB. Now, Cepheid is very busy with COVID. They have an incredible demand for their COVID cartridge. Why would they continue making a TB cartridge in this crisis, right? They'll go to wherever the money is. So we're all worried that every diagnostic company will drop TB tests and switch to COVID. So this COVIDization of everybody and every company is a very real concern. And that's exactly what is happening. And then in the midst of all this, Trump is doing bullshit, cutting funding for WHO, global health. Many countries are likely to drop their foreign aid contributions because their economies are hurting. And they need to be more populist and inward looking and take care of their own. So we have a serious damage control strategy waiting to be worked out for TB because the predictions in the models because of COVID is very dire, and you can take a look at the estimates of the impact. Now, in the early days of the pandemic, we went around, including me, TB has a lot to offer COVID, right? So we said, okay, TB, we use GeneXpert, you can run COVID on it. We have a molecular test like the Indian one, you can use, run COVID on it. TB program staff can be used. TB isolation wards could be used. We have a BCG, maybe it might help or not. We can test it out. So we're kind of optimistic that TB will somehow, help with this problem. But now I'm starting to ask the reverse question. Yeah. Given the incredible investments made in COVID-19, I mean, billions of dollars spent on COVID-19, all sorts of crazy innovative work happening in this area. I'm saying let's beggars not be choosers. I'm more than happy to take anything that COVID has to offer and use it for TB. This is not a time to be, having this superiority complex. I'm like, yeah, please, whatever it is, give it to me. So long I can salvage TB, I'm very happy. I don't care where I go begging, so long as TB benefits. So here in that spirit, I wrote that piece in Forbes most recently, where I kind of did a long inventory of wonderful stuff happening in the area of COVID that I think we could potentially repurpose for TB if we are smart enough. For example, all of us know the incredible number of apps developed around COVID, right? For education. So if could we educate using the same app and say, if you've been coughing for 2 weeks, please go test it for TB. Here is your nearest clinic or your testing center. Could we use these apps for contact tracing around TB as well, right? Could we use these, bots to chat with the chat bots to talk to patients with suspected TB and guide them to the right place? And then there are, those sorts of chat bots developed by an Indian company, Q Scout, for contact registration, tracing, and so on and so forth. I mean, we never saw this level of interest in anything for TB all these years. And now we are seeing all this and millions of downloads, right? Like that Indian app, Arogya Setu, is the most downloaded health app ever, right? Because of the number of Indians who've been forced to download it.
Yeah.
With all sorts of dodgy data protection systems. So none of us know whether to trust that app or not. Anything from the Indian government is hard to trust. And this one in particular, nobody quite knows what the hell is happening with the data. Triage and screening. So Manu, you spoke about the mobile, the portable digital X-ray system, right? Take a look at this. This is a Fuji. It's actually handheld. It looks like a big digital camera that you hold in your hand. You can put on a tripod, and then there's a small screen that you put away, and then you can network with your iPad or a laptop. And you generate a digital X-ray very easily and quickly. And then you obviously have now AI-based algorithms for TB, and you have AI-based algorithm for COVID as well, right? And the COVID AI algorithms have also been, I think, submitted to FDA for CT scans, right? How do you know from a CT scan this is a COVID pneumonia versus something else? So that's one example. There is a company called Hyphy, which already has a cough detection tracking app that's available. I don't think they have enough data at this point to separate a TB cough from some other cough, right? So I think these cough apps are interesting. Now imagine using a cough app in my home in Canada or in Palo Alto. That's a different scenario from being in a low-income house with tremendous noise levels and all sorts of ambient noise. So you have to even separate cough from all the rubbish noise within the household or within the community. And then secondly, separate TB cough from pneumonia cough, from COVID cough, from influenza cough, from some other asthma cough. That's a whole another kettle of fish. Or is the idea not really to separate the types of sounds or patterns into disease triaging? It's more to do with you have been coughing for 2 weeks at a row now. It is high time you went and got checked this, right? So that's more of a blunt instrument where all you're doing is you're using duration of cough and then putting out a push notification saying, we detect, or the app detects that you have been coughing for more than a certain number of days. It might be a good idea to get checked for TB, right? All of this is buried within that. And I think a lot of research needs to be done. So there are people running around collecting a library of cough sounds, a database. Obviously, you then need the ground truth of who had TB, who had pneumonia, so on and so forth, to then see if those things can be resolved. But an interesting area of work, nevertheless. You can substitute this app with Alexa or Siri and see whether Siri or Alexa can also do an equally good job of warning you've been coughing for too long, right? Diagnostics, incredible innovation in this space, as you all know, in the COVID field, mind-boggling levels of innovation. So that's the Gene Expert test, that's the TB cartridge, and that's the COVID cartridge, right? So right now, as we speak, a lot of the instruments that have been purchased for the TB program are running the COVID cartridges as we speak, because it was a quick way to increase molecular capacity. That's the Indian indigenous molecular test by MolBio, which has a chip for TB, also has a chip for COVID-19 now. Sample collection is one area where wonderful innovative work is happening, because sputum is a vexing sample for TB. It is not an easy sample at all, okay? Because it needs to come from deep within the lung, right? And if I have a cough, but I'm not able to generate enough sputum, then there is really no sample except saliva. And saliva simply probably does not have enough TB DNA for molecular tests to pick up. So sample collection has always been a dodgy part of TB and not a very happy aspect. But for example, if COVID self-sampling is coming through, or if simple anterior nasal swab rather than the deep one, the painful one, which is hard to do, or just a spit or a mouthwash can be used, that will be very exciting. And all the antigen detection. Look at that Abbott $5 antigen card test. Imagine if we had something like that for TB. That would be a miracle, a dream beyond dreams in TB. Anything that can take us away from this vexing sputum and microscope will be a massive progress in the area of TB. And then obviously there are treatment innovations happening as we speak, right? Right now, medicines are reaching people on motorbikes, right? all of us are ordering food left, right, and center on our food apps. And in countries like India, these food delivery guys are booming, right? I mean, this is like the biggest business in India. They have all sorts of little kids on motorcycles running around delivering samosas and whatnot. So that same thing should be tapped for delivering medicines. So I don't need to go to the clinic. You just send my medicines home to me. That's wonderful. Telemedicine, India was kind of lukewarm on this, as are many other countries, but I think COVID has pretty much busted that open, right? There's no choice but to get on the phone or get on our telemedicine and make this happen. And people are starting to see that it's not a bad idea to avoid going to a specialist and get help over the phone or whatnot. There are digital adherence tools. I use one of them myself. I'll show you. So this is, so I am pre-diabetic. So I need to take my metformin every day. I need to take aspirin every day, and I need to take my statins every day. So in the first few months when I started taking them, I just could not remember, did I take my pill this today or not, right? Because I'm not sick, I'm not symptomatic, I'm taking them for more for prevention. Then I stole this from a TB conference, because this was all actually being used for TB. And this is the picture you see on the top right. This is called a smart pill box, right? So what it does is, when every morning I get an alert on my phone. That's it is actually from my phone. So I get 7 a.m. I've set it up so that I get a reminder on my phone saying, please remember to take your medicine. That itself is massively helpful for me, because the minute I see it, I usually take it right away. Then I don't have to worry about it, right? But this pill box, when I open it, as I'm doing now, right? And then you can see my medicines inside, right? The minute I open this, you see this light flashing. Basically, this sends a signal to the cloud. And then I can go onto my dashboard on my computer on my phone, and it tells me exactly when I opened this pill box. It doesn't tell me that I took it. It just records the fact that I've opened it, right? So then I know when exactly I've taken the pill, how many doses I've missed over many, many months. So it's pretty much not just me. My TV program, if I had TV, could also look at my adherence sitting wherever they're sitting and monitor it. And there are people and there are innovations like 99 dots, which is being used in India. So Microsoft India came up with this. Basically, you take a blister pack of a TB pill, you open the pill and you see a 1-800 number. Using a non-smartphone, you just give a missed call. You're not wasting any phone minutes. And the missed call logs into the system and says, okay, you opened the blister pack, you made the missed call. That means you took the pill that day, right? So that's again a way of, it doesn't guarantee you took it, but you at least made a missed call, right? And there's video DOT. So I swallow the TB medicine, but I do it in front of a video. And that person on the other hand can see and verify that I've taken it, right? Then I don't have to go to the clinic and swallow my medicine. There are call centers. I visited call centers in Patna where these young women are sitting and talking to TB patients. Why haven't you come back to the clinic in the last week? So the whole adherence technologies are a very rich area. There are smart pill boxes which will beep at you every day at a certain time until you open it. And then when you open it, the beeping stops and it logs that you opened the lid, right? So all of these are interesting innovations that can be used. Data visibility is spectacular in this pandemic, right? We now have the ability to look at it district by district, tracking, geospatial tracking, hotspots. None of these are easily available for TB. And it really makes me wonder why we missed all of these ways of getting information. The vulnerability indices, where you can actually say this district is most vulnerable to TB because of this, and the other, could be very interesting. And the remarkable work happening around aerosols, just the engineering work around what's an aerosol, where did we come up with the 6 feet distance? Where did we come up with the, the need for a face shield versus a mask? Dramatic engineering work happening in this space. Now, for years, for centuries, we didn't do this kind of research for TB. But COVID is forcing people to even ask these very fundamental aerosol transmission type of questions. And masking, masking should also help TB, because TB is an airborne infection. but we always kind of stigmatized use of mask. But thanks to COVID, at least that stigma is going away, right? Right now, Manu is wearing a mask and none of us think that it's bizarre. And so why is it not more culturally and socially acceptable? Healthcare workers all these years were never protected from TB. That's why we have very high rates of TB in health workers. But thanks to COVID and the need for PPEs have made it a lot more acceptable to say, where is my N95 respirator, right? Why am I not getting the protection I need? And then, of course, dramatic investments and understanding the importance of social nets, right? Just if you were willing to give paid sick leave for COVID, why would you not give paid sick leave for TB, right? It's the same logic, right? Someone with TB is unable to work, and until they get better, you just pay them so that they can self-isolate, they can buy their foods or medicines or whatever. That level of understanding simply doesn't exist for TB as it does for COVID. And of course,
so Madhu, just on that point, since there is such an eerie similarity between TB and COVID from a transmission perspective as well, the isolation programs, the challenge because the treatment is long. Is there an isolation program for TB where people
on paper, yes. In reality, hardly anyone ever does that because they just don't have enough isolation rooms in hospitals. And at homes, unless you give people paid sick leave, how will they isolate? Poor people have to go out and make a living, right? It's been very difficult to actually get countries to understand that and actually pay people with TB. Just cash makes a huge difference in the lives of people, right? Forget all sorts of things. Just give them cash and they will be able to do a much better job. And that's what Amartya Sen and Abhijit Banerjee and Esther Duflo and everybody else been advocating for. In a crisis like this, just give people money, nothing else, money, cash, right? It has to be cash. It cannot be complicated stuff. And then that immediately makes a big difference. So I think TB needs to learn from that. And then the multi-centric research studies, Solidarity Trial, Recovery Trial, COVAX, CEPI, or ACT Accelerator, look at the amount of global partnerships and collaborative work happening in COVID. Never had this for TB. Not in 100 years it has happened. So I'm asking, why can we not think along similar lines? Look at the investments in COVID vaccines, COVID treatment, and the amount of money. I mean, I don't even know what to make out of this number. $160 billion spent on COVID, 50,000 papers and preprints within 8 months. This is just bonkers, the amount of interest and amount of money. And I can't even tell you, just as a comparison, TB vaccine work received 100 million last year. 100 million was all that TB vaccines received all of last year from all donors. And here you are looking at $160 billion spent on COVID. And it's like, there's not even a comparison. I mean, it's like TB investment is like a speck of dust compared to COVID-19 right now. And lastly, just investment in public health, the understanding that healthcare really matters, that a robust investment in healthcare will benefit TB and COVID, everything else. That itself might be a great learning if countries can understand finally that health is wealth, and without health, there is no economy, and we must start spending more on healthcare. Again, another rant of mine is how miserable countries invest in health, right? India spends barely 1.5% of its GDP on health. I mean, and India claims to be an emerging economy, a BRICS country, and a leader with such pathetic investments in health. Not a single Indian government, whichever party it is, has ever been able to do better than that 1.5% investment of GDP, which is like the rock bottom, not even like rock bottom. So last slide. The cynical part of me, and that's my comparison of COVID investment. So COVID-19 vaccines have received over 5 billion already just this year, and TB received 100 million in the year 2018. Not even a comparison, right? And I already told you why I think that is the case is because TB does not affect privileged and white people in high income countries. It will never get the attention that COVID-19 does. But I'm hoping that if we can steal some of these COVID-19 innovations and systems and make sure that there is a lasting benefit for TB after the COVID pandemic dies, then maybe, just maybe, we may be able to get TB back on track because it's so far off target right now. So that's from my side, Manu, and I know you have a lot of questions and comments, so I'm happy to take the time to answer them.
So first of all, that was phenomenal. And I think just the kind of discussion starting point. What we'll do is let's open up to questions and people can type their names on the chat, and then we can just do that via the chat. One thing that we'll end up doing is, Madhu, I just want to see how much time do you have actually?
I'm fine.
You're okay on time?
Yeah,
because most often what we do is officially we are till 2 p.m., but I would be excited for the discussion to actually go on, because this is an incredibly important aspect of
Sure thing.
So many threads running. And just you let us know when you might have to, I mean, at some point of time we will stop, but let's just open discussions, comments. People can just write, if you write a sequence of either name or just type your question. And then maybe, Tyler, you could just give people the capacity to unmute themselves.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And then while people are typing a question, one thing I wanted to mention is, you know, the TB similarities, and when you also look at malaria and COVID, it's the same situation, because Abbott is the primary. 41% of all of these malaria RDTs are made by Abbott. And when they started their RDT lines, they actually shut down the malaria lines. And for 2 months, it was the same issue that we were not sure whether the malaria pipeline will even continue, because it has no profit margins associated.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I cannot imagine any diagnostic company working on anything other than COVID, because the market is too lucrative and the demand is sky high.
And the rest of the production lines are in South Korea. And no wonder South Korea made a phenomenal number of early, maybe not so good antibody tests that were coming out for COVID as well.
And then lots of dodgy Chinese products running around too, which we don't know anything about.
Yeah. Okay, questions. People can raise hands, type in chat.
Yeah, why don't we do raise hands, just because I think it's a little easier to be streamlined. So yeah, use the blue hand, and I'll feel free to unmute yourself after I call on you. I see Pat first.
Oh, sorry to jump to the front of the line. Just fabulous talk, and so many issues in this. I thank you for all this work. I was curious, the one person that jumps to my mind in some of this is Paul Farmer out of Haiti. Mm-hmm. and I just wonder, I posted a link to a Nicholas Kristof piece two plus years ago about this topic, but are there things that are coming out of that space? His Partners for Health crowd, who does a lot of work in low income environments and so forth, or I just don't know. I haven't been following this.
And then Pat, could you just do a one-line intro, just which country you're calling from, and just
sure. I'm here in the U.S. I'm in the U.S. and I think if I'm sharing my video, what you see is I was trying to use a Foldscope to check some composting toilet samples to see if I could learn how to detect helminth eggs, which of course now I've read that you need to make a flotation thing and get them concentrated, and I'll follow up on that. But just this class has been phenomenal to me, and my son Scott was really benefited from his time with Manu, and so. I'm a huge fan. We took a box.
Pat spends time with Engineers Without Borders.
Yeah, we took a box of Foldscopes to Nicaragua. I thought Manu had this all lined up that somebody was going to come and get them. So we are now, after we're finding a way, we'll get them rolled out to communities as part of a global grant that Rotary will fund. Once we figure that out. But so it's longer than one line. Sorry, I didn't mean to yak.
Madhu, go ahead. Paul Farmer and the model.
So I know Paul very well. And so Partners in Health is genuinely doing interesting work. I think what they are trying to, so for a while, Partners in Health said, look, we have been using community health workers to do a great job of contact tracing and other things in Haiti and other countries. We want to bring it to the United States. So it was an example of something learned in a low income country that is kind of being brought given how miserably US has dealt with this pandemic. So that's one of the nice examples of learning from other countries and kind of bringing it to North America to deal with it. Yes. And one of their strengths is community-based care, right? They're trying to decentralize care to the lowest level possible. And I think one thing this pandemic has made us so acutely aware of is that any care close to home is far better for all of us, right? So even for me now, I was using a dentist, halfway across the city. After this pandemic, I found a dentist on the next street, close to home. Close to home. Anything that will not require me to get on a public transport, anything where I don't have to meet with 50 people and wait in line. I think the world is flipping, right? I have my endocrinologist appointment next month. I'm going to tell her, do you mind if I don't come to the hospital? Can I just talk to you on Zoom? Because all I need is for you to look at my report and then renew my prescription. Why am I wasting time traveling and getting exposed? So think hard about what is the lowest level of care that one can deliver it to. Obviously, home is the dominant place now, given that we are all kind of sheltering at home. Finding primary care close to home and actually delivering it successfully would be an incredible legacy, good one, to come out of this pandemic, if that can be made to work.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, one thing that happened in our local area, we're about 45 miles in from San Francisco, and there's a group of 8 Rotary clubs, and we got almost 100K worth of Rotary funding to put on our community healthcare providers for their COVID-19 response high priority items, and all of them pivoted to telemedicine in a heartbeat. So, that's what they're doing. They're using, pulse oximetry tools. They're using blood pressure cuffs. Some of them have got integrated apps that roll it up into a dashboard. And they and diabetes care. All of this is something that they're able to really make a difference in, and keep people at home safe. And it's just, I'm very struck by it. It really resonates with the thing you're suggesting. Yeah.
Who's next?
Sonali,
awesome. I saw Sonali up next. Yeah.
Go ahead, Sonali.
Hi, Dr. Madhu. That was a brilliant, insightful, and engaging presentation. I'm Sonali from India. So I have a question over here. Are humans fighting evolution in the TB context because there seems to be little progress in terms of vaccine production or development and multi-drug resistance and XDR? So is it the genetic sequence that mutates frequently, or is this an evolutionary constraint of the TB bug, Mycobacterium tuberculosis?
No, not really. TB is not one of those things that mutates every day, every week, every year. So we never worry about that. That is not biology is not the constraint. I think it's neglect. It's actual willful neglect that we don't have better tools, or we allowing people to die. I don't think this is really like a desperate scientific breakthrough that needs it to be done. If you gave me enough money, I can wipe out TB from this world right now.
Thank you.
Madhu,
Awesome.
we're counting on you.
Yes.
No pressure, but
no, but I actually mean it with from the bottom of my heart, because what is important is, before people awaken to the fact, often enough, this is something we talk about in this class quite a lot. It's always the burst of the idea is the most exciting bit that happens, and a lot of that happened. But just really understanding a true, complete picture of a problem is so essential in every single problem. So I think, that part is...
Don't you think this pandemic itself is the single best demonstration you can ever wish for, that given money, resources, and interest, every bloody problem is crackable, right? Yeah. Vaccine, test, yes. What do you want? Done. App, done. Dashboard, done. There is not a thing we could not do in this pandemic, with money, with smart people, with collaboration, with just excitement and interest. Science is not, to me, the rate limiting step of global health. It's the unwillingness to do it. It's the willingness to willfully allow some people to die and not intervene. It's the politics of it. It's the fact that rich and privileged people will not do anything which doesn't directly benefit them. It is those sorts of things that I think are the vexing problem in global health. But if nobody, let nobody tell you that science is not a solvable issue in global health, because COVID has blown that argument out of the water. 8 months, 10 months is enough, right? Look at Ebola. For decades, we had nothing for Ebola. No vaccine, no treatment, not even a test, for Christ's sakes, right? And then the minute Ebola reached the shores of the United States, boom, there's a vaccine, there is a test, there is every bloody thing got done. Why? Because the rich people started feeling anxious and they threw a pile of money at it, and every damn company R&D the shit out of it. A beautiful test for Ebola, great vaccine, 100% efficacious. So don't tell me Ebola was not a solvable problem. It was all along. It's just that it was limited to a few poor African countries and nobody gave a shit. That's the explanation, right? Not science. Ebola was never a scientific problem. It is now 100% solved scientific problem because it had to arrive in America. To me, that's probably the only way to get disease under control. Threaten some rich people with it and immediately the problem goes away.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have to threaten. Unfortunately, for global diseases, if you don't take care of them, they will be on your shores no matter what.
Yes. So what happens in Wuhan will arrive in Palo Alto.
Yeah.
But why is it that logic doesn't penetrate people, right? It's not that they didn't know it before. They just didn't care. It's only when it starts threatening us, wherever we are, our families, that we feel compelled to act, right? So very predictable. But it's a wonderful discussion point in this course that science and technology is never a problem. You throw a problem, throw smart people and resources at it, it will break, it will yield. It is the politics and the unwillingness to spend money and invest. That to me is a problem. Otherwise, how do you explain that in one of the world's richest countries called the United States, African-American moms have a 4-fold higher of dying during pregnancy and childbirth? The rate of maternal mortality in African Americans approaches some low-income countries. How? Why? Don't tell me it's a medical issue or a scientific issue. It is just racism, plain and simple. If you don't understand that, then you make it all into a scientific issue. It's not, right? It's racism, it's neglect. Same thing with the indigenous people in Canada. TB rates up north in Canadian Inuit communities 300 times higher than Montreal. You think it's a scientific issue? It's not, because TB has been wiped out on the rest of Canada. We allow TB to continue in the Inuit communities because we are racist and we don't care about them. That's the answer, not a science, not a technical issue, because the rest of Canada wiped it out very easily, right? So this, to me, these disparities tell us with stunning clarity what is science and what is politics and what is racism, right? And separating the two is important. Science to me is easy. Not that I'm downplaying your work. I'm not saying you will, but you see in 8 months how much science and innovation is possible. And you tell me that it can't be done for any other global health disease, right? In principle, every global health disease is soluble. In practice, it never gets done for all of the other reasons that I spoke about.
Yeah, no, I think 100% agree. Fur, you have your hand up for a little bit.
Yes, thank you. Well, I made this question to Tyler last session that I want to ask you, because I believe that education is a fundamental part of this. I mean, really understanding the complexity of where we are located. I'm from Mexico. I'm an anthropologist, and here's my other anthropology story, where there's this also power is in the middle of this. And that is also epistemic power, knowledge power, and the fact that people cannot translate what they actually need into words other than a vote, for example. And there's this special hateful nightmare that existed here in Mexico where government tried to or translated progress as everybody should have a floor. So that was like the whole policy, and there were a lot of deaths of childs and elders because they slept on the floor. So if you sleep on I mean, dirt is way better with you. I mean, I've slept in thousands of floors, and when you sleep in dirt, it's like thermo something. I have no idea, but it's fresh when it's hot, and it's hot when it's cold outside.
Yeah.
So a lot of people died, and this was because there was this generation of academics that were, I don't know, vinculated with authorities, like with politicians specifically, and they drew all of those things based on psychology stuff, that a person might feel better if they had a floor and they would go out and get more money for them and therefore progress. So, I mean, the question specifically is whether science, I mean, how do we balance this? I mean, when the science is on the service of the sign, and when is the sign is on service for science? Because if we do science for science, then we might not know where specifically this, I mean, look at social media, for example, right? So that's the question. How do you balance on your quotidianity? Because I think that's what interests me the most. How do you, on your daily basis, can manage this? Because I am also a big fan of taking the system down. So I sometimes get too angry, and I just get very wordy, and I stop doing stuff. So how do you balance that?
Balance science with
the sign
activism.
And
Yeah, I think
Brain-
science advocacy, activism, also the balance between sometimes science doesn't have all the answers.
Yeah.
And I think first, coming from an anthropology perspective,
Yeah.
human,
I
so
hear you. One of the couple of things that I do, again, I have to admit that what I was 14 years ago when I started as an assistant professor is not what I am today, right? I have grown, and I am taking way more risks today than I would have done when I was a young assistant professor. So in various stages of our career, we can do different things, right? At my stage, I'm a full tenured professor. I don't give a shit about anything anymore, right? I have enough papers to last me a lifetime or two. I have all the awards, I have grants. Nobody touches me, nobody challenges me. I just do what shit I want, and I'm able to say things because I have authority. And so I think Manu would be in a similar position, right? We can take risks that a younger person might not be able to do. But I think when you become, when you have a voice and you have a platform, that is when I think you can do some crazy stuff that others may not be able to do. For example, if I see something, I can call it out now better than I could do 14 years ago. So I think if I asked me, I was way more involved in science alone in my early stages of my life, because I had to publish, I had to get promoted, I had to be a good scientist, researcher. And over a period of time, I see myself doing more of public engagement, more of advocacy work, more of writing, more of meeting stakeholders, policy work, right? I'm in WHO all the time. That gives me a different side of my career. I think this is a well worth understanding, because young people sometimes are there in a hurry to have an impact. Have you seen that? Impact. Okay, so now how do you make an impact when you yourself are not very strong, right? So I think the first step is to really become a deep expert at something, right? So if Manu is an expert in something, right, he has to be really good at it. That's when he has the credibility, the ability to bring money, the ability to supervise students, to teach, and to have a good, strong voice and a platform and a good job and a university that would care about him, right? That is not something you earn overnight. So young people really sometimes have to double down and say, I'm just going to focus on the best PhD I can do on this topic. And one day I will have that platform and that voice, right? So expecting to kind of catapult all that to suddenly have an impact is a bit crazy and putting way too much pressure on young people, right? I'm sure 15 years ago, Manu was not thinking the way he does today. We all go through it. All I'm saying is give yourself time to have an impact, right? Give yourself time and prepare yourself. Think about it like this. If you want to scale Everest, you're not going to just get in and run and make a pitch for the summit, right? You plan, you train, you get acclimatized, you spend years at the base camp or months at the base camp, and then the second camp and the third camp. And then one fine day when everything is right, you make a hit for the summit, right? That strategic long-term thinking is necessary for a good career and to have impact. And give yourself that opportunity to grow and become strong. People have to look at you and say, hey, Tyler is the world's expert on this. Can we call him and ask for his help, right? Each of you will develop a deep expertise in something and you have your name written all over it. And through that, you're going to make a difference in the world. So that is my message, right? So give yourself time, become a strong, whatever you're strong, best anthropologist anybody can be, a best biochemist anybody can be. And then through that, impact will come. It'll have to come, but you got to get prepared and be there for the long haul. Impact is not something that is done overnight. How many years has Manu been working on Foldscope or any of his innovations? Decades worth of work, and it's still not done, right? It still needs to reach people. You are in it for the long haul. I see myself working on TB for the next decade. The work is gone and increased for me, and I need to be in it for the long haul. It is not something I just flirt with for a week or two. It needs to be sustained.
Thank you very much.
Let's take a few more questions. And I think, yeah, this is very valuable also for, we hear high school students and many engaging in science. And sometimes this message really gets lost very quickly. That without impact, it's almost about, I think when I heard you, it's almost about discovering yourself. Who we are only shines and come out after a long ordeal of thinking about these problems. And then you really know your anchors. Let's take a few more questions. I know it's already 2:10, but I know Haim's hand is up for a while. I see Sasha. Go ahead, Haim. We can also do rapid fire questions for Madhu.
Thank you very much for the talk. It was very interesting and very eye-opening. My question was about how does early detection before symptoms affect treatment and treatment length specifically?
So it's a question of how early do you want to go, right? There are some of us who are working on latent TB. So if you are latently infected with TB and you give an antibiotic, you can prevent development of TB many years later, right? So that's called preventive therapy. Think of it as prophylaxis, also called preventive treatment. Then there's early diagnosis of sick people. Once I start coughing, the sooner you can detect me, the less likely I'm likely to transmit the infection to other people, right? So early detection helps. Earlier, the better, just like cancer. Earlier you detect a disease, more options you have, less the disease is spread, less it's likely to transmit to other people. But biologically, we have challenges in detecting TB early because not enough bacteria are found in sputum in the early stages. And we are stuck with sputum. We don't have any other magical way of detecting TB. If we could detect TB very early with a biochemical or a biomarker test, it would be phenomenal, like a finger stick blood sample that can tell us who has TB. It would make a huge impact on all of us. So right now there is a urine lipoarabinomannan detection test by Abbott. It doesn't work well in people without HIV, but if you have HIV and low CD4 counts, the urine lamp strip test does seem to help. But better versions of that are being developed by Fuji and Gates Foundation and FIND and many others. So if at all we have a rapid antigen urine detection test, it would be the SLAM antigen in the urine. that's where the innovation is likely to come through. Right now, it's not on the close to market.
Thank you very much.
Who's next?
Let's maybe take 2 more questions, Sasha and then Rishi. And then just introduce yourself, Sasha, which country you're calling from.
Yeah, hi, I'm calling from London. And I was wondering whether you see any progress in terms of people being more ready to invest, let's say, in a tuberculosis diagnostics or therapy, or whether we need to have a different approach because maybe altruism or something doesn't seem to work, as you said. And I guess like I don't think you're suggesting something like bioterrorism or something that we just have to get tuberculosis everywhere. When something new pops up, that we just have to infect the right people. I guess that's not a very ethical way to solve this. I could imagine that, you know, what always works these days is trying to show like the financial gain people could have by investing. I don't know whether that would be maybe a different, not the ethical approach, but maybe the more realistic way.
So we have made a million of those financial investment cases around TB innovation, and it has not worked. Right?
do you have any?
So it's almost like, this might sound very cynical, but this COVID pandemic has made me understand this better. That as humans, we genuinely have challenges in understanding why somebody else somewhere needs our attention and time when we are inwardly looking right now, right? It's super hard now for people to say, okay, we are in this devastating economic loss. Why, remind me again, why would we send foreign aid to Sudan right now? Why? We have white Americans who are unemployed, right? This is the way our mind thinks and works. And that's exactly what somebody like Trump will say, because that is his DNA. He's saying, America great again. We, us, our jobs, China is bad, Chinese virus. He is actively propagating this way of thinking, and people love him, right? How many people voted for him today, right? Half the damn country. What does that tell you? It tells you that at its fundamental root, humans are a very selfish group that cannot think beyond themselves and people like them, right? You can at best relate to people like you. The minute they are not like you, the black or brown or whatever, you immediately start seeing them as the other species, the other group, that you might do charity for them, but you don't necessarily see why it's a human rights issue, that they are the same as you and also are worthy and deserving of whatever it is that you're doing. This is really spectacularly important right now, because this nationalism we are seeing in every country now is bonkers. Like, you know, pretty much buying up all of the COVID vaccine stock for oneself is what the rich country game right now is. What does it say about our international solidarity, right? Where is global solidarity today? It's shattered. It is broken to pieces in this pandemic. And it's exposed all our deep-rooted selfishness within our countries, and to also think as a globe, as planet. And I will stop by saying, why does this tell us something important? It's almost like COVID-19 is testing humanity's ability to think and work like humanity, as one species, as one race, that we are humans. Whatever our color is, wherever the hell we are all humans, right? We all look out for each other because we've learned that the world is a small place. You can't keep a pandemic from spreading. You can't wall yourself off. You cannot shut down travel forever. And if we are failing in this pandemic to work as humanity, how will we handle climate crisis, which is the next tsunami that's coming our way? How? Because which single country can deal with climate crisis? Climate crisis demands international cooperation, right? Every country needs to come to the table to solve something as big as a planetary climate change, right? And we are failing miserably in COVID-19 right now. I've written a whole rant on why global solidarity is failing and global governance is shattered. Nobody knows who is leading the world right now, because America, which was once a leader, is no longer credible, right? Who will trust America right now with this botched up pandemic response, abdication of leadership, exiting from WHO? Every single thing a good country should not do, America has done already, right? So it is catastrophic for global health, because it's like a headless chicken now, right? Global health governance right now, it's like a headless chicken. Everybody's doing whatever shit they want. Nobody trusts WHO anymore. It's like free for all, right? Quacks are running the show in many countries. Quacks, people who don't know shit about COVID, who can't separate a virus from a bacterium, are advising prime ministers on what to do. It's like absolute insanity.
We know that for sure in the US that's not happening. So it's not about, we don't have to look very far. This is a reality of,
I know. Think about climate crisis. What innovation will be needed? What level of global cooperation will we need to be able to use our best minds, right? Our best scientific minds should be working on it right now if we want to avert disaster, say 10 or 20 years from now, right? Who's doing it? There's still people denying climate change, even as we speak. Just as they denied COVID-19, there are people out there who are actively discrediting climate scientists, right? So how do we overcome this anti-scientific, nationalistic rubbish wave that's sweeping the world? India is doing such bullshit. I can't even begin to tell you, right? Scientists have all been sidelined in every country. CDC is off the table. Indian scientists are nowhere on the picture. All sorts of businessmen and hedge fund managers think that they know more about health. It's just complete madness. So to me, just recovering from this fractured world we live in to even work together is one of the biggest rebuilding that needs to happen. And I think if the elections go well today, tonight, tomorrow, it will be the single biggest hopeful moment in the last several miserable months. If it goes the other way, we are in it. We will be desperately put behind, not just in this pandemic. You think climate crisis will get any traction under 5 more years of Trump? No, he's denied it already many, many times. So how many years the clock will get set back now? How harder will we have to work and do international collaboration at a scale unprecedented in human lifetime, right? So young people, to me, I think are the single last hope, Manu. I don't know how you think about it, but I can see that young people are able to think so clearly because they're not worried about their next election or their paycheck. They can see further into the future than adults can. The worst people right now are older men who are failing the world right now.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's another rant.
And, this is also the reality of why we are all gathered here.
Yes.
Primarily because the hope is on the young shoulders as well. Because it's a harsh reality. Rishi, you had a question. You wanna?
Yeah. Hey, my name is
just
Rishi.
introduce yourself. One line.
I'm Rishi. I do research and enjoying kind of relearning and falling in love in science rather than being focused about publishing paper or doing deliverables. So I'm expanding my horizons here. So you gave a wide, diverse view of things, and you mentioned, you kind of said it's a neglect. So I was wondering, if the why is not working, what has not worked about the financial incentive, but how would one make people care or pay attention? I just wanted to ask about the how and the neglect in one sentence and gain some perspective on, or your thoughts on it.
I think Rishi is looking for the positive view of the direction as well.
I think if we want people to care, the cynical answer would be the older men will have to die or leave. Seriously, I'm not kidding you, because they are simply not able to put anybody other than themselves first, right? So I mean, I can give you 1,000 examples, but ask yourself a very simple question. Why has America allowed young children in schools to get slaughtered due to gun violence? Anybody else would have looked at it and say, oh my God, small kids are getting shot in schools. We got to control this gun violence. Not a single American politician has been able to do it. Why? Because they're all hand in glove with the gun lobby. That is the level of self-interest and the inability to put future. Same thing for climate change. No older adult will ever get behind this agenda. Greta Thunberg is seeing it, right? Malala is seeing it. My student, my daughter, 12-year-old daughter marched for climate. She sees it, right? But older adults, especially men, cannot see it. Women leaders are way better than male leaders. I don't know how you think about it. I think, look at the New Zealand Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern. Oh my God, she's like the queen, right? I mean, I think every country deserves a Jacinda Ardern. If that was like a single magic wand I could wave, every country in the world will have a leader like Jacinda Ardern. Case closed. Climate change will get taken care of. Healthcare will get taken care of. Gun violence will get taken care of. That's just because they do a way better job than older men. So I think leadership change is fundamental. And I think the more young people who are emerging as leaders, look at this amazing young leaders we are seeing. They can see it and they are the future. So I think for men among us, especially older men, the best thing we can do to help is get out of the way. Really, just get out of the way and say, okay, we've had our run, we've failed. There is not a chance in hell these guys are going to change anything. We got to change. I mean, look at Biden. Even if he wins, how is an old white male, how much do you think he can get this? He will not. He will still be a problem, right? The same thing, Boris Johnson, all of these guys, they will not get it. They will not get it. They will get it. You can cry whatever you want. You can take to the streets and march. You can have the best scientific document. They will find a way to bury it, right? Because their thinking is not just ossified, it's beyond ossified. There's no word for it I can come up with. So I think we need change. We need young leaders, we need diverse leaders, and we need women leaders if we have any hope of getting out of this mess that humanity is digging ourselves into.
Yeah, no, I think the global health power structure is so ossified. Just, there is a political side of it, but also just the whole Geneva, if you go to any of these meetings, you see it with your own eyes.
I know.
Yeah, so yeah. But
okay. Like Sana?
Describing it, you can see. Yeah.
Sana?
Hello, I'm from India, Mumbai. Thank you for an amazing session. Actually, my grandfather also died due to tuberculosis, so I know what it is to lose someone suffering from tuberculosis. I'm a person with microbiology background, and I was just concerned, like a country like India, where Ayurveda and Unani is one of the things like in medical community. So I don't know, the therapies like to tackle antibiotic resistance is Unani or Ayurveda from countries like India is one of the treatment options. I don't know, like you are an expert, of course, but can you comment on this? I read research papers, but I don't know anything which acts on the mycolic acid and can tackle the situations, because we need something, India or the countries like where Ayurveda is a storehouse for anything, Unani, Ayurveda, and everything for a country like India. That's
so I do understand and respect the old traditions, but I struggle with these alternative forms of healing, because when I don't see randomized trials or the kind of evaluation that I'm used to seeing, I'm left wondering what on earth they're doing, right? They threw some medicine for coronavirus, coronil or whatever rubbish that was. So again, untested, unproven, put on the market. I think those, to me, I'm struggling to separate good science within that space from nonsensical anti-science. And if that industry does not wake up and understand that there is a burden of proof, why would we have so much burden of proof on an allopathic medicine? and practically next to no burden of proof on an alternative medicine. To me, I cannot reconcile that in my head. So I don't care where it comes from. I want proper scientific evaluation. And if that shows promise, then I'm willing to engage. I'm not worried about where it's coming from. I'm worried about whether it's a proven, scientifically validated innovation. That to me is where all of those guys are failing. They're not convincing anyone, including the public, on whether those things work or not. Some Baba Ramdev coming on television and telling me that medicine works is bullshit. That is not science. I'm not willing to accept that.
Yeah, and I think, and I see this also as a phenomenal opportunity. I mean, what happened with malaria again was it came from Chinese medicine, but there was a proof. And really the collaboration between the two communities led finally to that being the frontline drug. And, we really do have the kind of scientific tools that you could throw in a plant extract and I could figure out what the actual compounds are and really go with, but yeah, I don't see that happening. This collaboration is not there in any way and form. Yeah. Okay, let's take a last question. Who's still been waiting? I see. Okay, there are no more hands.
If I'm seeing any.
Oh, do you see a hand?
No, I don't think I see any.
Okay, all right. Madhu, I don't know how else to thank you, but thank you so much. This was just so amazing.
It's a real pleasure, real pleasure. Thank you so much for teaching this course and engaging such interesting people from around the world. It's a very new way of teaching for us, isn't it? For you.
Yeah, no, I think that's why I premised the class by opening is like, we are all teachers and we are all learners.
How many people applied for when you announced it, Manu? I remember tweeting about your course and you said lots of people.
We had lots of applications.
700 or so people. And then eventually we have synchronous learners and asynchronous learners. So all these lectures are posted online. But I think the heart of much of this is, I've done science in this space for a while, but for a moment to have this diverse group of people coming together, because we're all doing specific projects. And every individual project arose from a conversation that we would have never even had unless this diversity was on the table. And then, of course, something that is extremely difficult for one individual is trivial for the other. I mean, the fact that there are teams with anthropologists and biochemists all together.
Amazing.
I've been really deeply enjoying it. I think this is how we are going to teach. And like the fact that we can now think, like, okay, let's do innovation and delivery in round one. So there's a lot to learn from here in flipping how we do teaching.
Absolutely true. And Manu, actually, sorry, now that I'm seeing, we actually do have 2 questions in the chat if we have time.
Sure. I'm
from
here.
Paula and Sheetal. Paula, why don't you start first?
Hi, it's just a quick question. Is there an email where we can contact you through?
It's on my slide deck that I've already sent, Manu.
I'm going to add that to this recording tab on Notion.
And then Madhu, you can let us know if we can post this as a video recording.
Yes, you can.
Okay. Yeah. Sheetal?
Sorry. Hi, Madhu. Thank you so much for your lovely talk. It's really inspiring. My question to you is, you mentioned about women leadership and especially women taking roles like Jacinda Ardern. But how would you suggest or I don't know, to tackle problems like biasness or tackling problem as to overcome the hierarchy that you see or the power that you see where things do go wrong, things are happening wrong right in front of you, but you are incapable of making any change, because you don't have that power within you right now. I mean, if I have to compare, I'm just a researcher here, and I know that there are things that are going wrong in front of me. I still stand to my base, to the principles that I value, but it's a struggle because I'm at the minority, and the majority are with the people who have power. So I don't know how do you encourage people, or how do you say how to fight this against?
And then Sheetal, can you just say where you're located, just so that there's context?
I'm a master's student and I'm studying in Germany right now.
I mean, again, we know many societies, including India, are deeply patriarchal, and it will really take a lot of effort to change this. I mean, even in the global north, we're discovering how racist the societies can be, right? So patriarchy, racism, white supremacy, these are all various elements of the same underlying problem. And I think the one thing that unifies all of them is the ability to accumulate and control power, right? It's all power at the end, right? So to break that power will require, I think, first, individual awareness and growth. So for example, my team is actively doing training on anti-racism and anti-oppression, right? We are learning about privilege. We are learning about how to be anti-racist, how to be anti-oppression. That is the individual growth. So learning more. I think men have to work even harder than women, in my opinion. The second part of it is in the institutional change or the societal change. So there, for example, somebody like me should say, are there enough women in leadership roles in my university? Is there enough diversity in my own department, in my own team, right? Am I paying equally to my male students and female students? Those are institutional change. And then there's a societal change, right? Why can we not have a woman president? Why can we not have a woman prime minister? Why there are so few women CEOs? That requires us to go and vote, like what we saw this week in the United States. Enough people, especially young people, have to get out and get more politically active, right? If you called out something, it's hard. But if 10 people surrounding you called out, then you can bring someone down, right? Sometimes you have to hunt as a pack in order to pull down a big animal, right? So you got to work in teams and collaborate. And that's why somebody like Greta Thunberg doesn't work alone, right? She inspires thousands and thousands of young people who are willing to take to the streets and say, climate change matters, right? Alone, she did nothing. But together, it's a movement. Same thing with the Me Too movement. Same too with the anti-racism, Black Lives Matter movement. Convert individuals into movements, and then the floodgates open for change, which I think this year is important. It is, at least for all its miserable year that it has been, the movement around racism and the reckoning that's happening, the Me Too movement that some young, brave women kicked off and pulled down big guns like Harvey Weinstein are important. And I think they're all like path breaking for other women to stand up and say, yeah, we also have been harassed, right? Everywhere precedents have to be set. The first people, unfortunately, have the hard time, but then they open the doors for others like us to walk in and say, okay, this is unacceptable, we've got to change. So I hope that is inspiring enough. On that message, we can close this session.
Yeah, and as another note to that, if I could jump in, I think, yeah, super great question, Sheetal. I think to your point earlier, Madhu, about building ourselves, as a young person, building ourselves up to a position of power too. I think part of what this class kind of is, and class and really community of frugal science, what we're trying to do here is really create a group of people where we are all now a pack, so to speak. And I think even though we're working on many different things, I think the fact that I feel like any of us now, hopefully we feel comfortable enough to say if I'm in a situation, if I'm in something where I realize that there's something very pressing, very important in the world, whether it's affecting me, affecting someone else, now we know that there are all these people around the world we can talk to, right? And this is just the start, right? So I think this is where we're trying to take this more, is we're building out this pack of people who really care about one another and about the world.
That the conversations have gone well beyond frugal science, right? We made this into so much wider discussion, well beyond TV where I started. That itself is a win, right? That you're able to see the big picture and then contextualize your work. And also what you said, Tyler, that it's not a class, but a community. Wow, that's a massive difference between those two words. I've never taught a community. I've only taught a course, right? PPHS 511, whatever your university title, tightly controlled in a classroom, only 11 people could attend, only mostly white people could attend, to this community is a massive leap. And that we owe to the pandemic and to the online technologies that we have, and the willingness of teachers like Manu to take risk, right? He could have easily taught a local course with 8 white Stanford grads and he would have been fine with it. But he took a chance and he brought you all in from around the world. That is what the community is. And I love the idea. And then each of you maybe can then nurture another community. And then one day this whole thing snowballs, right? I did not know I could do it until I taught journalists from around Africa, who they had never met or seen each other, but they were all in my community, and we learned about epidemiology together. And I threw all of that videos on YouTube for the whole world to see. We can disrupt education, right? This is a disruptive education model. I'm sure my university is going to be unhappy if I continue doing this. I'm sure Manu is going to get kicked out of Stanford at the rate he's going. But disruption, sometimes it's best to do it and then apologize, right? Just do the damn thing. Then he says, sorry, we'll think about it next time, right? So I think we can do crazy shit today, which we could not have done before. So let's use this pandemic to sneak in some good things, even though the overall atmosphere is depressing. So stay well and take care, all of you. Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure, Madhu, to host you. And we will be back again. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. See you all soon.